So first of all, I want to just say that teaching is an act. So as teachers are actors, you need to follow a script. So the lesson plan is essentially a script. So for learning to occur, you need a bit of a script and a plan to deliver certain content so that students can learn along the way. So all teachers are expected to have a lesson plan for the learning that they plan to deliver. And the learning obviously depends. You've been through all the modules. It depends on the subject area. It depends on the sector. It could be early childhood, primary, secondary. So that also that's where the curriculum comes in. What aspects of learning will you plan to deliver in the lesson plan? And it's also very important to be planning, because many mentors have the policy, no lesson plan, no teaching practice, because a clear plan shows that learning will occur or will attempt it to be delivered and facilitated. So basically what lesson planning does, it ties together the context, the learning goals, the learning activities, and the assessment being used. So rather than just going off the top of your head, where things won't be sequential, you won't have different cues and strategies, and the dimensions of learning and the management side of things, which you've all hopefully been through within your learning modules. And also allows planning and anticipation. So these are essential skills that allow the teacher to efficiently organize herself, himself. It will allow you to organize the students, the facilities, so you can document what sort of facilities will you need to use, what are the available resources. So will you be in a classroom, will you be in outside setting, you could be in the gymnasium, whatever it may be, and it allows you to organize for that. What space is available? Because sometimes you might be in an open learning area. There might be multiple classrooms in place, and how you're going to manage that. And the ultimate goal is to lead students towards their learning goals in the most effective manner. And this differs from person to person, teacher to teacher. Everyone's different, just like your attitudes and beliefs, your preferred way of delivering your teaching and learning. And it also comes down to your experiences and what you feel comfortable doing. So essentially you're planning to promote and also planning to prevent. So planning to promote learning, obviously, that's the ultimate goal of a teacher, is to facilitate the learning processes for each of those diverse students within your classroom. But you're also planning to prevent things going wrong, and things regularly go wrong as a teacher. So it could be a technology not working. It could be an incident within your class. So it could be a bullying incident, or someone gets hurt or injured, or it could be a weather occurrence. So by planning, you can modify those activities and learning sequence to ensure that the teaching and learning process isn't affected. So really vital. And I know when I was first learning to be a teacher that the lesson planning became a little bit tedious, because ultimately you want to get there in the classroom, you want to be instructing and interacting and all of that. But at the end of the day, planning is a really good habit to get into to ensure that everything goes the way you want it to, and it also allows you to have an efficient resource later down the track. So some advantages of a good lesson plan, and just going through. So really finding the relevance. So this is your second part of your assignment, and also will also, as I said, will effectively allow you to prepare for your teaching experiences. So number one, it provides a predetermined start and end point for the session or lesson. So making sure that you can schedule and structure activities within the start and end point, and rather than having an open-ended lesson, it really allows you to be specific to the amount of content you're going to put in the lesson. Number two, the plan can be referred to along the way to check for progress. So, as I said, sometimes things do go wrong, and you need to adapt and be flexible. That's one of the common occurrences as a teacher, being flexible. in a range of situations. But having that plan can be referred to along the way. You can also check how well a group is progressing. So if they're struggling with certain content, you can readdress how you're going to approach the curriculum and the delivery. And if they're getting through the lesson plan, well then you can also look at maybe, who knows, it could be ensuring that the content is a little bit more challenging or whatever it may be. Number 3 there, the plan provides reference points for making long-term and short-term decisions. And that goes with the progress. So depending on how quickly the students are actually picking up the content, or if there's certain areas that are causing concern, each of those can facilitate the decision-making process going forward in relation to the course content. Number 4, the plan can be the basis for making modifications along the way. So as long as you have that base structure of scaffolding of learning, so building up students' learning along the way. So as long as you have that structure, you can make modifications along the way. So you might find a different way to do things. The students are being innovative. The students come up with a different idea of a different spin on the activity. Yes, you can make modifications along the way, and that's another important aspect of being a teacher, being creative, being innovative. But as long as you've got that base plan, you can build upon that and use different resources and strategies and all of that. Number 5, the plan allows for better evaluation of teaching effectiveness. So what was planned and what actually happened, and this can really assist with your reflective practice. So if things didn't happen the way they were intended to happen with your lesson plan, then you can reflect on what actually happened, would you improve upon that, how would you change things, all of that process. And that's going to allow you to learn and develop. It's going to allow you to deliver the content more efficiently to the students at another point. Number 6, the teacher can use a plan to verify that he or she is teaching according to the design of the pedagogical model. And I'll get into pedagogical or teaching approaches to learning shortly, and different ranges of approaches you can use. And there is some samples of that throughout the modules. But you can just make sure that your approach is in line with the actual designated plan. So for instance, an example might be, you might have a cooperative learning approach, which is really using the students with different roles. So it could be a literacy type activity where you've got a reader of the text, you've got maybe an analyzer who talks about the characters, you could have someone who's going to do an illustration of the scene. So you're having those different roles, but ultimately, and you can provide, those students can actually provide a presentation to the class about each of their findings from a certain text, and that's really cooperative learning. So different roles, working as a team, and that type of thing. So there's a whole range of different teaching approaches you might have, and the lesson plan, you can go back to verify that you're on the right track with that approach. The aims of the lesson plan also, it provides a section of the overall learning development plan. So whatever the overall plan is, you just take a section of that. It also allows the teacher to rethink the logistics of the lesson or session. So what are the actual logistics of the session? And that, as I said previously, that comes down, it could be what sort of equipment will you need to use, what sort of teaching cues and the discussioning, or what sort of grouping techniques and those type of things. So really rethinking the logistics of the session. You're able to use as a resource for future reference, and this is really important as an early teacher, a pre-service teacher, because the more resources you can get early on, that will ensure it'll be easier, because you can draw upon these ranges of ideas and strategies to deliver a specific area and the content within that area. It can aid in the teaching and lesson reflection, as I said previously, so what was intended to happen versus what actually happened. And another one, especially for your placement, it can assist in communication with your mentors. And just with all those things in mind, you can talk to your mentor and say, right, I only got through this amount of content, and then you can discuss maybe why that actually occurred. Was there some behavior management areas that slowed down the lesson? Was it too easy, so the students tended to get through it quite quickly, and you had to actually come up with a new idea or a new activity? And those are the types of things that can be used to communicate with your mentors. And genuinely, as a pre-service teacher, when you have a lesson plan, you try and get through as much as you can. And sometimes it's more appropriate to just ensure that classroom management is in place and the students are on task. So sometimes you don't always get through the lesson plan if you're managing the class, spending time doing that. What to consider in a lesson plan. So it needs to be thorough yet concise, easy to follow, and easy to understand. So essentially, just like a script or whatever it may be, you want to have a quick glance and to guide your instructions to the students. You don't want to be reading anything for too long when you've got a whole big class of students. They're wanting to learn. The subject matter. So be innovative and creative with the subject matter. The different types of learning skills and principles that need to be taught, be on there. The class size, and that's important if you're going to, a lot of the time you will break up the class into different groups. The student characteristics are also important, and you can do pre-assessments to see what are the students' backgrounds in relation to an area, what are their learning styles. So you might want to actually tailor content to the students' learning styles. So they could be visual learners, they could be auditory learners, or kinesthetic hands-on learners as well. So depending on the type of learner, that can influence your planning of the lesson. Other considerations, and sometimes you might be in a school where there is low resources and you need to be able to adapt. So what facilities and equipment are available and needed? Are there weather influences? And sometimes, especially for physical education, weather can be a huge issue, and a backup plan is vital. And it's something you don't consider when you are learning to teach, is that you do need a backup plan, especially for weather in physical education. Dress requirements, and this can differ. You could be doing something messy, some cooking, or some science experiment or something like that. So you might need to ensure that there is safety there, or because you don't want the students going home with dirty or stained shirts. There's dress requirements in phys ed. So it's generally a recommendation that the students have appropriate runners and the tracksuit pants and shorts and those type of things when they are doing phys ed. Risk management to ensure that students are safe at all times. So look at any risks in the environment. Is there any obstacles in the environment, or you could be doing an activity? You could be doing a bit of a walk around the campus and looking at some of the fauna and flora and the plants and those type of things. So what's actually in the environment? Is it enclosed? Is there fences within the classroom? Is there anything that could pose a risk to the students? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be liable if you haven't planned for any of this and checked out some of the potential obstacles or foreseeable risks within your area. Teaching cues are vital because in a whole session, so if you're taking a class for a 60-minute period or whatever it may be, that's a lot of content to process, especially if it's new for the students. So sometimes you can reinforce specific teaching cues so that the students can really pay attention to the really specific information that will be most valuable to take away and to facilitate their learning. Consider appropriate questions, and a really good way to do this is through Bloom's taxonomy, and I'll get into this shortly, but you can actually tailor questions to different levels of learning. So that's something to consider when you are teaching, and facilitating discussion is a good way to interact and try and really reinforce the learning that's occurring. So if students aren't quite listening or haven't picked up a concept, you can question the students with different layers of higher order thinking, and then the students' responses to those questions can provide insight to those who haven't quite picked up on certain concepts. Also, you need to, one of the huge ones when you're learning is the time constraints. So what are the time constraints? You might have, it could be an introduction. You might have a brainstorming type activity to introduce a session, to introduce a concept, and you need to be wary of how long each will go, because you don't want a whole entire lesson talking about the introductory concepts and all that type of thing. Your core activities within the session, how long will they go for? It's important to find time for maybe a debrief conclusion to really sum up the key points from the class and facilitate discussion questions. And there's also organisational considerations. So how are you going to progress from activity to activity? Are you going to progress in difficulty and scaffold learning and those type of aspects? Bear with me a sec. The light's just turned off. I've just got to turn it back on. Okay, next up, some organisational considerations. So previously I set this up as a bit of a diagram for physical education, but this can really be applied to a range of classroom settings. So some of the administration considerations that you need to have when you're planning your lesson are an introduction, so role marking, instant activity. So you really don't want students sitting around too long. They can get off task. They can start distracting others. You want them engaged as soon as you have control and management of the class. Starting off with simple tasks to start off. Making them think, especially in secondary school, from the get-go. Also in phys ed, you want them active as soon as possible, because that's essentially why the students are there. They want to be involved and active in your phys ed classes. So that's phys ed specifically, but also you can apply this to a range of different subjects. Don't talk about what you're going to do. You just do it. I mean, sometimes it's appropriate to have a few dot points on the board of what you're going to be covering during the session, but you don't need to spend time outlining every single activity you're going to take and the details, because that's how you can plan. You can allow the session to flow from activity to activity, and just by stopping an activity and then progressing as you go along. The purple area there, I'm becoming used to this Collaborate tool, so start to interact a little bit more as we go along. We've gone through the introduction and administration. There's the equipment distribution. So for all classes, if you've got equipment, it's important to use the space effectively and spread the equipment out into different spots for the different groups. It's sometimes important to have equipment monitors so that there isn't a huge line and rush and hustle and bustle to get equipment out, because the students want to be into the learning activities from the start. Sometimes it's useful for transitioning and timing to distribute some of the materials before class or during phys ed, as I like to use an example, during the warm-up periods. You can ensure that there is sufficient equipment, and that's vital. Sometimes it's easier than others when you're actually in a school with plenty of resources, but making sure there is sufficient equipment for the students. Sometimes if there isn't enough equipment, you can use groupings and that type of thing. Maximizing participant practice and transitions. You could have small groups, lots of action. Students know what they are doing. A constant teacher presence is important, especially if you've got them in groups, making sure they are on task, and if they are with their friends and that type of thing, that you're engaging them appropriately in the group activities. Making sure the tasks are achievable. You can progress the groupings, and preparation is also vital, especially when you're looking to maximize participant practice and transitions between activities. I'm sorry about that. That should be an I and G. Okay, so next one there, you want, as I said, you've got a long time to deliver the activities. And that's a lot of processing for the students. So you want clear and simple instructions. Limit to 5 key points. Like within any activity, 3 to 5 points is usually sufficient, depending on the year level that you're targeting. So less points for the younger students and more points for the older students to take away. Cater for the different learning styles. So for instance, if you know that your students really respond to visual learning, you can provide demonstrations and diagrams and those type of things. If your students really respond to listening, you can provide podcasts and lots of instructions and pre-record. Even you can combine audio and video. Audio and visual learners with video facilitation. And you also got kinesthetic and hands-on learning, so you can ensure that there are a lot of, it could be creative activities where the students are making things or drawing or whatever it may be, that they're busy doing those type of areas. But sometimes you do have multimodal learners, and that's providing a range, and that's probably the safest bet, whereas you're going to provide a range of different learning practices.